Hey friends, Bart Castle here, cloud computing and subject matter expert here at CBT Nuggets. I have the great opportunity to sit down with Quincy Larson from freeCodeCamp. Quincy, are you there?
Howdy.
All right, look at that. He's even got the mug. I love it. It's good stuff. Well, Quincy, the biggest thing for me about this opportunity is to, kind of put some great tools out there for learners who are working through systems administration or maybe in other parts of IT and looking to break into the software engineering world. So I thought maybe we could kick things off by just hearing a little bit about where you're coming from and just what the FreeCodeCamp offering looks like. Appreciate you spending some time.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me. So FreeCodeCamp, we have a ton of learning resources that are really three different places. The core curriculum is what everybody thinks about usually when they hear FreeCodeCamp, which is just like a single linear programming curriculum that people can work through and they can earn certifications as they go through. They're FreeCodeCamp certifications. They're not certifications from AWS or like Microsoft or Google, but we also have a little bit of training on those kinds of things if you're interested on our YouTube channel. And we importantly have training on a lot of skills and tools that we don't directly cover in our core curriculum because our core curriculum is so focused on just mostly JavaScript and Python development. We don't touch on like Golang or, working with like Kubernetes and stuff like that. But we do have a little bit of resources on that. And then we also have about 8,000 tutorials on our publication that you can read through. And so if you go to FreeCodeCamp, there's a big search box. You can just search whatever it is you're learning, and there's a good chance that we've got like a nice hands-on tutorial with code examples and everything on it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, you bring up one of the first questions that I had when I was thinking about how we might chat today. Where are the edges of coding and infrastructure as code and DevOps? I have an increasingly difficult time these days trying to express like what is and is not software development anymore. It's getting very gray out there along the edges. Do you have any insights on where this stops and starts?
So I try not to get too mixed up on what constitutes coding and what is technically doing ops and other disciplines, network engineering. There's definitely a big convergence going on there. I think more in terms of like what is useful and what is not as useful, like what is immediately applicable versus what is something that would be nice to have in your back pocket should you encounter it. I think fundamentals are always going to be useful. And understanding fundamentally like how basic data structures and algorithms work, understanding fundamentally how the hardware is working with the instructions through the varying levels of abstraction that you're sitting on top of. Like those things, they're never gonna. They may fundamentally change at some point, but they haven't changed in 60 years.
So it's been a pretty predictable model for a while now.
Yeah. So I think that. Rather than trying to put things into specific buckets, the real question I would encourage people to ask is like, will this be useful, immediately? And like, what are my potential dividends from sitting down and spending the time to learn these things? And I think you can't go wrong with basic computer science, math, basic programming concepts.
Yeah, and that I think that's a great take on it too. And to kind of backfill some of that, when we talk about network automation or DevOps administration or infrastructure as code, a lot of those frameworks and languages are using what you're kind of calling some of the building blocks. They're going to have JavaScript variants or Python variants that allow people to kind of take that building block and then move further with it. Is that something that FreeCodeCamp can help like ops administrators out with as well?
Absolutely, yeah. Our goal, there is no knowledge that is not power. That's a quote from like Mortal Kombat 3. but I always felt that way. Like, well, everything is helpful. It's just a question of whether it's worth like the time and energy. But I definitely consider like learning JavaScript, learning Python. Those are super useful. You've got giant ecosystems, two of the biggest software development ecosystems out there, really, programming language ecosystems anyway. And if you learn like the basics of those, you're just unlocking tons of tools that you can optionally kind of stick into your cart as you go further down.
Put that tool here, get this one right over here. Yeah, I love it. I'm a tool guy. That's what really makes me continue to stay in IT is just the continuing proliferation of tools to solve these problems because they don't sit still either. Now, Quincy, how many people are we talking about? How many folks have been through the FreeCodeCamp experience so far? An estimate for us?
Yeah, that's a good question. About 500,000 people use FreeCodeCamp every day.
Dang.
Most of those people are just hitting like the various tutorials. Like I said, we've got a long tail of like tutorials on a ton of different topics, and then a good chunk of those are going through the core curriculum. In terms of people who've used FreeCodeCamp to get a job as a developer, that based on like looking at our LinkedIn alumni network, I can very conservatively say that at least 40,000 people have gotten a job as a developer where they previously weren't a developer going through FreeCodeCamp.
Oh man, that's great. It's such exciting for me as a trainer. This is one of the big things that I really love too, is that being a part of that transition for people. That's got to feel good knowing that you're helping tech folks take a step from so many different areas where they are now to where they want to be.
Yeah, and we have this like weird kind of, you would expect like an older doctor to be a more confident doctor, an older lawyer to be a more confident lawyer. For some reason, when it comes to programmers, people think like, oh, I'm already 25, I'm 30. Like, can I even learn this stuff anymore? No, absolutely. And I can say the median age of people going through FreeCodeCamp's curriculum is 30. So it's mostly mid-career folks that are learning the code.
Oh, well, that's a super interesting statistic. I know personally for me, I've been through a few transformations, and I'm sitting about 16 years now in the tech space. And I know there were definitely specific phases that I went through. So that's really encouraging to think as a learner that there's no chance other than right now to start making that transition that you want to see, and keeping the skill set that you have and growing off of it, which I think is kind of what is behind CBT Nuggets and FreeCodeCamp working together in the months ahead. A chance for us to bring some of our ops training in, operating systems and platform administration, automation and systems administration, pairing that up with the coding skills that you've been referring to.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just published a CBT Nuggets course today on our YouTube channel, and it's just immediately met with like roars applause because people love learning about system administration. And so this was like Linux server administration, and people just like, I was reading through the comments like, thank you so much, like this is great. And a lot of people are going to be discovering CBT Nuggets through these awesome courses that you're sharing with us, so thank you.
And that particular course that you were referring to, that Linux Foundations one from Sean Powers, that is like near and dear to my heart, because when I think through phases of my career, there was the pre-Linux phase, and then there was everything that came after that. Because once I learned to work with Linux and do Linux administration, it really changed everything about the types of communities I wanted to be a part of, the technologies I wanted to work with, the types of companies I wanted to go and pursue. So I love to hear about that. And I think the other thing that I talk to a lot of folks about as a cloud trainer is not just thinking, oh, I need to go get this exam or learn this one tech, but rather thinking like, okay, well, what kind of life do you want to live? What sort of job do you want to have? What kind of companies do you want to work for? Like, where in the world do you want to live? And I think that being able to split between ops and development are really where the sweet spot of tech flexibility comes from. You can leverage that in an infinitesimal number of directions. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look, DevOps is one of the highest compensating fields because it's an integrative field that combines just, time tested like server and database administration know-how and with, contemporary coding skills, I guess. Not to say that like DevOps, the ops aspect isn't contemporary, but the development has progressed quite a bit, and you may even be intimidated by the breadth of the sheer volume of new Python and JavaScript tools. But don't be, because if you master the foundations, if you really get just good at the core libraries, you're going to be able to quickly pick up new tools as you need to on the job, and you're going to be able to have resources like CBT Nuggets and FreeCodeCamp to continue your education.
Well, I love that. When I went to college back in the day and began my career path, I ended up going to a small bachelor program. There were two camps. There was like systems and networks administration and then software development. Those were like apparently the two worlds of IT at the time. And now if I were to break it down, there would be 5 or 6 different distinct areas of it. You seem to be in a good position regarding the job market itself. I mean, we could say software developer or engineer, but what do you think? What are some of the hottest areas? Are there any catchphrases that you might throw out there for some of the learners that are watching?
Yeah, I mean, I'm increasingly hearing about multi-cloud and just being able to leverage the different services. Microsoft has some really good services that are specific to their ecosystem. Amazon, of course, has good tools, and then you've got other tools like observability tools and
Oh yeah.
hosted databases that are where you can get like tons of clusters. Probably I don't want to mention too many different specific brands,
Sure.
but I can tell you that New Relic has some great tools. MongoDB has some great tools, and a lot of these like they're contributing to the open source ecosystem as well. So it becomes a way that you can. And I just love the open source business model, if you will. Like we use so many different self-hosted tools within freeCodeCamp. We use Rocket Chat, we use Discourse for our forum, and of course these are all on a cloud server somewhere, and we can go and administer them and everything. But if we want, we can pay somebody to basically administer this on behalf of our nonprofit. And in some cases, we have people doing that as like a form of in-kind donation to our nonprofit, or we can just set it up we can even run it like locally. Some of the people that freeCodeCamp helps, maybe they'll be like helping like inmates in a prison learn to code, and they need to be able to run everything offline because at least in the US, inmates can't have access to the internet. So there are all these additional constraints, but like just understanding how servers work and designing for these extreme kind of circumstances, you can really make things more robust. And the other thing is just like connectivity. Like when you look at like the bit rates that you can get in different parts of the world, even here in the United States, there are parts of rural parts of the United States where people can't get much faster than like a non-broadband connection, which is defined by the FCC is very slow. I think it's like 3.5 megabits down or something like that. So there are lots of people who benefit from just like innovation in these different spaces.
And I kind of summarize a lot of that stuff as integration work. When I look at the patterns over the years of like what we do as software developers and engineers, it's often about that gap between where we are and some product and solution that might solve one part of it, and this integrative layer that we need, whether it be like normalizing data or getting interfaces to talk to one another or exchanging events between different systems. It's also never been a better time to be a developer because there's so many tools, and it's also an exciting time to be a developer because there's so many tools that we can use to solve these problems. And again, it's not sitting still. So I really appreciate the emphasis of keeping that learning forward and participating in those alternative learning models. The idea that you could take a lesson offline and bring it to inmates in a prison system, that is the kind of flexibility that I think is really appealing to programs like FreeCodeCamp. So my hat's off to you guys for accomplishing that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're just getting started. We're 6 years in.
So one of the other things I was going to ask about then, how long are people spending typically going through this? You mentioned hundreds of courses or pieces of the course. How long are people spending working through this? Maybe rough timelines.
So I definitely encourage people to take it slow and just go like maybe 30 minutes, an hour a day. And that's one thing I'll just evangelize right here is get plenty of sleep and take your time. And Rome wasn't built in a day, and your career is not going to be built in a day either. But people generally, because the curriculum is pretty comprehensive, like the actual core curriculum is about 3,000 hours of learning and building projects. And that's a pessimistic estimate, like because we have, a lot of people who are totally new to computers and are just now learning how to use browsers, for example. And for them, it's probably going to take a lot longer than somebody who already has like an ops background. Like they might be able to blow through the curriculum. The fastest anybody's completed the entire curriculum is a guy named Florin Pop, who is a Romanian software engineer. And he speed ran the entire curriculum in 29 days of like several, maybe like 6 to 8 hours a day. So even for an experienced developer, it's that much content that it would take a long time. So I frequently get messages from people who are like, I started in 2016 and I just got my job as a developer. So that happens almost every day. Like people so it takes years. Again, I just want to emphasize like it's a lot to learn, but do a little bit, sleep, do a little bit, sleep. If you do that, then the pathways are going to start getting etched in there and you're going to start grokking it.
Yeah, I could not second that enough. When it comes to consuming technical material like this, you got to give yourself some room to breathe. I love that you guys include a lab and some exercise elements to it too. We gotta get in there and work these systems. Is there any advice on like setting up IDEs or getting environments? Is that part of the curriculum too? Sometimes we don't know what systems we need to help writing these tools to begin with.
So we just do everything in the browser for simplicity because I don't know about you, but I've spent like entire days of productivity lost to trying to get C libraries in order on my machine and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Right. Or just trying to properly configure, Ubuntu so I can actually launch like the GUI, things like that. Like you're not going to be productive if you're just spending all the time setting up your environment. So in a perfect world, maybe like you get a job and they give you like an image on your machine so you don't have to do a lot of that basic configuration. It was not time wasted. I learned a lot from thrashing through that. But we put everything in the browser, like run Python in the browser, run JavaScript in the browser. We're getting ready to where we can basically have VS Code itself running in the browser.
Oh, sweet.
And so like I would just recommend, if you don't know what to use, VS Code's free. It's pretty solid. Like almost everybody on our team uses VS Code. JetBrains has some great IDEs as well. If you want to get involved in that, there's open source ones like Eclipse, but don't get too hung up on the tools. Focus on the concepts and the actual, code you're writing. Even if you're writing code in a browser somewhere on freeCodeCamp or on Replit or one of these sites, that's still coding. You don't need to have like, your own Linux box that like you built yourself by hand and all that stuff to be a programmer.
Bart OS. Here we go.
In a browser, you're still programming.
I love it. Great distinctions and abstractions there. So I'm trying to envision, as we kind of get down to the end of the conversation, I'm trying to imagine folks, we're looking at folks that are in IT that can make this transition into software development. And you're also thinking of folks that are coming in from outside of the IT industry as well then?
Yeah. You don't have to already have an IT background, but it certainly helps. I mean, the core programmer skill is just being able to, power through error messages, power through failing tests, and not get daunted and not get discouraged, and just be like, it's cool. Talking to machines is hard. Machines want to help. They're just really dumb, and we have to put one foot in front of the other for them and tell them exactly what to do. And if we do that correctly, they'll do it. And so patience is the real killer app. If you want to be, I would imagine I haven't worked in IT, but I would imagine that it would be a killer app. Like when you're trying to like figure out what's wrong with your network, for example. Like I was a school director prior to like learning the code at age 30 and working as a software engineer and then ultimately creating freeCodeCamp. Like our network went down at the school, and I spent 3 days going in and out of the closet and debugging and learning all about like DHCP and like, all these different things that I was so frustrated. And I think I just gave up so many times, but I'd always have to go back to it because people would be like, the network's down. And I'd bring in contractors and they'd look at it and they'd be like, oh, I'm not sure what's going on here. And then I would be left on my own again. It was frustrating. No. But eventually, after 3 days of like covered in dust from this decrepit ancient server room, I fixed it. And that's like kind of like the school of hard knocks IT experience that I have. But I can tell you patience is the true killer app. If you are patient, if you're like a total Zen master stoic, then you will be able to get through pretty much anything related to technology, whether that's IT stuff or whether that's software development stuff.
I love it. That's a great take on it. I definitely would second all of those concerns around the learning. It's a never-ending, exhausting process of continuing to grow. I've definitely been through that in the ops world. I think the last thing I wanted to kind of touch on here is just like personally for me, I didn't realize how much I had picked up from software development until these years later when I started trying to teach cloud computing to others and just like talking about APIs and talking about scripting and automation and realizing just how many little pieces had come together for me as I looked at this modern kind of cloud-based world, which for me is not a technology. It's kind of the entire superset as far as I'm concerned. It's all of the pieces. They're all there. You've got networks, you've got applications, you've got data storage, you've got analytics, all of the many different facets of it. It's all there. And it's come together together in a very like integrated way in the cloud. So for those of you out there wondering how cloud computing fits into this is it. I mean, when Quincy's talking about running an application that lives in a cloud provider's environment, that is exactly what they're using. They're using these integration layers to run the platforms that their code lives on. So this is where that synergy of ops and development comes together. Now, I think, Quincy, maybe the best question is how can people find out more about freeCodeCamp? Where can we find you, and what's the best way to find freecodecamp.com?
Absolutely. So if you go to freecodecamp.com, it'll forward you to freecodecamp.org. We're a 501c3 donor-supported nonprofit. Just go to freecodecamp.org. If you sign up to check out the curriculum, there's two things to note. One is I've got this giant spiel basically telling you like, hey, this is what you should expect. This is going to be hard. It's going to take a lot of time. Don't get discouraged. Build your reputation. Build your professional network. Don't rely solely on like building your skills, because the real world is comprised of people, and people are subjective animals that make decisions based on like what they think of you as a person. And building out like having a nice CV with lots of published articles and things like that definitely helps. But the other thing is you'll get an option to sign up for my weekly newsletter, which I send every Friday, and it just includes 5 links that I think are worth your time. So you can opt into that if you want. And that's really the best way to keep up with FreeCodeCamp and what's going on with us. But if you create a FreeCodeCamp account, you'll get those emails, and that should help you. But again, FreeCodeCamp, totally free. It's not like I didn't like put that on there.
Definitely.
I wanted to tie my hands and say like, we're going to keep it free no matter what. So regardless of your socioeconomic background, regardless of any number of different things, you should be able to use FreeCodeCamp to advance your skills.
Oh man, Quincy, that's great. And so for those of you out there who are still just kind of picking up on this, check out the freeCodeCamp website, take a Google for the YouTube sites out there as well, and check out the great content. And if you're active on any of the social networks, you are going to find a whole bunch of raving fanatics who love FreeCodeCamp out there, and they will tell you all about it too. Seek them out and get their support and join the community, because that's where all the exciting kids are having fun right now and growing and making transformations. So Quincy, thank you so much for chatting today. Do you have any final messages for those out there about to start that journey?
Yeah, just hang in there, and you can definitely do it. Anybody who is sufficiently motivated can learn to code. Just takes time and effort. So hang in there.
Oh, that is fantastic. Well, I can't wait to see how the CBT Nuggets and FreeCodeCamp partnership works out. If you've got an experience and you'd love to share it with us, look us up out there on the social networks, and we would love to hear from you. Thanks, friends. We'll see you out there.